again, good evening, everybody. So today we will see what is a Salesforce, how can we integrate Salesforce automation with UiPath, what are all the different ways to do it, and what are the advantages of having this integration with respect to the UiPath. Maybe like how can we save money, how can we save time, and all of those things. We will be just going with this webinar. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat where I'm just going to answer all of them at the end, right? So let's begin. We have already, in our previous webinar, we have already seen what is the RPA, what is UiPath, why are we choosing UiPath, especially when it comes to the RPA and all of those things. So I don't think we need a more definition why UiPath, but just to give a very simple definition, why UiPath in RPA is, we know that especially with respect to the software, we are almost evolving a lot, where people were not ready to accept the bots at least 5 years down the line, but now even a very small scale industries are very enthusiastic to go ahead and integrate their processes with respect to the robotic processing automation. And we have multiple automation tool in the industry, but we are choosing UiPath as a tool to integrate and to automate most of our processes, because the wide range of the opportunities we do have with respect to the integration, with respect to create our own custom activities, and also the multiple easy access to the marketplaces and other areas, which is pushing us to have UiPath as our primary tool, right? So today we are going to see how are we going to integrate a Salesforce automation in UiPath. So first of all, what is a Salesforce? So I think most of you guys have already been using the Salesforce. If not, definitely you guys would have been heard about the Salesforce application. So the Salesforce application is a kind of web CRM application, so which will be containing a vast data, which will be like really a very big data, where we are going to represent that, which is going to help each and every customer to go ahead and use it. So why we are going to use the Salesforce? What is the use of Salesforce? Is in the very beginning, we had the customer data which has been saved in the databases, and we used to have just the CRM. So the customer relationship management application which we were using before, it used to just go ahead and publish in their local cloud based, and where it was taking a lot of time and it was taking a lot of cost to maintain and to manage all of those things. So to overcome those costs and also the effective efficiency and also the performance issues, we come up with the Salesforce CRM application, which is the web application, which has been designed and developed based on the concept of the CRM which we had in the previous instances or a few years before. So now the Salesforce is a customer relationship management solution that brings the companies and customers together. And definitely it's a one integrated CRM platform which gives all the departments. It's not only with respect to some specific department, from starting with the pre-sales, marketing, sales, commerce, service, everything can be shared in the single platform. And definitely the usage of this one in the single view will be added advantage to the customer and as well as to the clients. So now we have seen what is the Salesforce and why are we using a Salesforce. But definitely when it is performing so many actions in so many departments, there is a wide range of opportunity for the automation in this industry, right? So while considering that, so it may be creating a contract, creating a lead, creating a coordinations, anything with respect to the Salesforce can be done through an automation. We really do not need any of the subject matter expertise many times when we are doing the automation. And when we are there are multiple ways to do an automation with respect to the Salesforce. So now let's see how can we do an automation with the Salesforce by using the UiPath. So we have seen in the automation, I think we have already seen like multiple ways of automation. Like in a very basic manner, we can even go ahead with the UI automation, where the bot is going to do this click, type into all these things to the Salesforce website. We can just go ahead, create a login workflow, and then we can just go ahead, navigate to the customer page, or navigate to the contract page, and then create a new contract. All of those things can be do in the UI automation as well. But here in the today's webinar, what we are going to concentrate more on is an API. So what is an API? It is like why do we have to go with an API integration with respect to the UiPath than the UI automation? Definitely. So I'm just going to start with how can we do the UI automation first, and what are the challenges which we might get when we are doing the UI automation, and then how can we use this API integration, which can be much efficient over the actual way of UI automation, right? So when we are just doing the actual UI automation by using a UiPath, so we all know the Salesforce is just a kind of visual representation of the database. So when we are loading some of the data to the screen, that is going to depending on multiple factors. One, the network speed. What is the network speed we do have in the current system? Second one, the handshake time, which is taking from the UI and to the database. What is the time it take to do the handshake and to refresh the data when it comes to the when it has to reflect the data in the UI? And definitely, even more, most of the time, even though there was a handshake was successful, even there was a good speed of network, there are some times where it is the elements on the screen is going to take some time to load, and there might be a chances where it is going to take a little bit more time than it was supposed to be. So when we are doing the actual UI automation, what happens is we have to make sure we are taking care of the element exist, on element appear, on element vanish. All these things needs to be taken care. And definitely we also have to be like make sure we have to give enough of delays to make sure like we are going to have it properly. So just to avoid all these delays, just to make sure we are going to do the successful run of each and every transaction, we are going to do the APIs. And what is one more challenge which we can just we might face when we are doing the UI automation is there might be a chances where the selectors might be updated many times when we are dynamically when we are uploading the data to the Salesforce. There might be a chances where the selectors even also can be updated dynamically. So in that case, when we have done the UI automation, definitely we will be end up with having the selector issues again. So to avoid all these things, the best way to do an automation with respect to the Salesforce is a API automation. Again here, when we have chosen the API automation or API integration with UiPath, there are two ways to do it. One is we can just create our own APIs by taking the help from any of our IT team or from any of the core developer team. We can ask them to create a REST APIs, which may be the REST or GET or POST or any of those kind of APIs, whatever we need. And then we will be able to pass the parameters, and we will be able to just call them by using the HTTP requests. That's the very simple way of first doing the API automation. And then there is another way. What we will do is the two-way integration of the UiPath Salesforce. What is this two-way integration? How does this is different from our typical API integration or the API calls by using the HTTP request, right? So is like we have the two-way integration. First one, we are going to do the UiPath connector for the Salesforce. What we do is like for the Salesforce application, whatever we do have, we are going to connect that Salesforce instance to the UiPath. In this stage, what we are doing is we are trying to create a connection between the UiPath and Salesforce, where UiPath will be able to access each and every data and each and every object inside of the Salesforce. And the second one is UiPath activity pack for the Salesforce, where we do already, like we have a set of activities in the UiPath where we can just go ahead, use those activities and then do the modifications inside of the Salesforce. Whether you're going to create a contract, whether you're going to create a new lead, or you want to update anything, you want to delete anything, remove views, maybe you want to view the report, all of those things can be done via UiPath activities itself, where you can find these packages, how to install and all of those things, which I'll be explaining in our coming slides. So here, if you just look at this, this is the native integration. So which I was just explaining in our previous slide. It is very similar. So this picture exactly show what is the Salesforce and how it works and all of those things. This is a Salesforce web application, which I was just mentioning, where we can just use this web application and do all the UI automation if necessary, or if we do not have an access, if we do not have the admin access, or if we do not have any of the consumer keys and security keys to do automation with respect by using the activity packages, we can just go ahead and use the UI automation by using the screen. But when we do have the admin access, when we do have an access for an API creations and consumer key and the security key and all of those things, definitely we can just hit the Salesforce backend instead of the UI. So here what we do is like the first step, what we do is like Salesforce connector app, where we are just going to connect this Salesforce backend database to the API. And once we are done, once we are able to successfully connect this UiPath with the Salesforce, we can use the Salesforce activity pack, and then we will be able to perform all the actions, which is going to update or the insert or any changes whatever we made in the Salesforce backend. And whenever we do the refresh in the UiPath, in the UI of the Salesforce application, the changes which made from the UiPath will be reflected. How that can be done, we will be just showing in our coming demo. Okay. So now, before we go for the demo and before we go for how are we going to connect the UiPath with respect to, to the Salesforce and all of those things, there are key benefits of using Salesforce integration on top of UI automation, which I have already explained in our previous slides. There are a few more where it is just real fast when compared to the UI automation. No lines of waiting or instantly launch an automation. We really do not have to wait for any of the page loads or any of the logins and any of such things when we are doing this Salesforce integrations. And then the scalable. The scale across the multiple platforms, respond to the large workloads changes definitely. So like when we are doing the UI automation, we have to go for one by one. Like when we have around some, let's consider we have 100 or 150 transactions to be done. We have to do, whenever we are doing the UI automation, we have to do one by one. But here in the Salesforce integration, we can just call them all together, and the UiPath activity itself has a capability to create a batch of 25 records at a time, process them, and then come back to us, giving us a data table as an output. And then it gives us the output as what and all has been updated in the Salesforce. And then it will just send the next batch of the 25 records. So that can be scalable and definitely respond to the large workload changes is very efficient in this way when we're integrating. And reliable and less errors, definitely. The less breakage in the API automation when compared to the UI automation because of the selectors, maybe the loading of the page, loading of the elements. All this will be avoided when we go for an API integration, since we will be directly calling the data in database instead of any of the UI based reliable things. And no human fatigue error, where it's not going to depend on any of the humans mappings and all of those things. We know what exactly needs to be done. We will be just picking up the SOQL queries many times, and then we will be inserting, or when we will be using those SOQL, which will be generated from the UI, from the Salesforce itself. So definitely there will be no human fatigue error. Low cost, quickly deploy automation in days, and we do not need the platform specialist. As I was just saying, we really do not need any of the platform specialists to guide us where to click to navigate to the specific page, or like what and all the steps needs to be processed to create or delete or to update any of the objects. So we really do not need any of them, because we do have the activities which is already in place. What we all have to do is like we have to pass the specific object along with the values to it. And then it's a very simple, like one platform, one workflow for all the automations. We really do not have to worry about, I have to create one separate workflow for the insert and another one for upgrade. No such kind of things which are actually needed. Instead of a single workflow, if we want to do an insert and then update and then delete based on a couple of conditions, we can just go ahead and have all of them together. So this is what the kind of the introduction about why we have to do the why we have to use the integrated Salesforce APIs and the activities over the UI automation with respect to the UI automation with respect to the Salesforce. So let's see how can we connect the Salesforce application, and then how can we use that instead of our automation. So for that, before we start working on any of the automation, we just have to install the UiPath activities in the managed packages. So as soon as you open the UiPath Studio, definitely you will not be able to see the package of activities with respect to the Salesforce. So for that, you can just click on the managed packages. You can redirect it to all packages and search for Salesforce activities. So here I have already been installed, so I'm not able to see the option called install. But when you are doing it for the first time, you will be able to see the install button over here in the place of uninstall. And you can hit on the install and you can click on save. So once you are done with that, the all activities which are related to the Salesforce will be appearing under the activities. So these are all the different activity set of activities we do have with respect to the Salesforce, where you will be just able to see all these things. Execute report, execute SOQL, get record, insert records, updates, upsert record, and all of these things. So in this, before we use any of these activities, we have to create a scope. So how are we going to create this scope? Is by connecting our Salesforce to whatever the instance of the Salesforce which we are working. We have to connect that in the Salesforce application scope, so that we are creating a connection between the UiPath and the Salesforce, and we will get an access to do all these actions which we have seen with respect to the activities. So for that, here you are just seeing one of the website which we have logged in. So how are we going to do this is, you just have to have the developer Salesforce application account. You can just go ahead, search for the developer Salesforce application in the Chrome. You will be able to redirect to one of the URL. In that, you have to create your own credentials, so that in that specific, like in your, when you are doing the Salesforce automation, just make sure you ask your business or your client to provide the developer instance of the Salesforce for that specific Salesforce instances. So in that, I'm sorry, just a minute. So yeah, we are here. So in that, you can just go ahead and ask them to provide the developer instance of their Salesforce application. You will be able to create your own credentials. And in that, if you can just go ahead, click on this settings and search for this app manager, you will be able to redirect it to the app manager. So here in the application manager, you can create a new setup. So in that new setup, you can provide all your names, API name, everything, so that it is going, we will be using this connection to connect with the Salesforce from our UiPath. So here we are just giving the app name and then the API name which we are going to create, and then the username and the password which you have given when you are trying to log in. And we need to enable this OAuth settings. When we are doing a OAuth settings, we have to provide the URL. So for now, for the demo purpose, we are just giving our local host for the callback URL. We are not using any of the production instance of the Salesforce. And it should be secured URL where we are just converting our local host to the secured one. And we can select any specific OAuth scopes to be integrated. If we do not want any of the specific one like chatbot or content, any of those things, and if we want a full access, we can always select the full access and we can just click on to the add. If we want any specific with respect to the chatbot or with respect to any of the specific APIs, you can choose your own and you can click on the save. So after you hit on the save, it will take a few minutes to reflect those changes. And then now we can just click on that manage. So under the, once you have that app manager, once you click on the manage, you will be able to find this consumer key and the consumer secret key and all of these things. So we do have the consumer key, we do have the consumer secret, and we know the username and the password which we have created to log into this Salesforce instances. You can just copy all of these things and keep it ready when to connect to the application. And for there is one more called a secret key. So for that, what we have to do is like we just have to go ahead. We are just making sure we are creating the policies and all of those things. So under the policies, if you just go ahead, you have to make this change for the IP relaxation. So enforce IP restrictions. If you have the enforce IP restriction, we will not be able to call these APIs. So make sure you have updated this to relax IP restrictions so that the APIs from the external source, that is nothing but the third-party tools like UiPath, will be having access to make all these changes. So once we are done with this change under the edit policies, we have to generate a secret key. So how are we going to do that is we will be just clicking on the profiles and we can click on the settings. So under the settings, we can just go ahead and click on the reset my security token. So here you will be able to find this reset security token. I have already have my security token. I just didn't want it to reset it again. So if you want to generate the new one, you can just come here, click on the reset token, and the token, once it has been generated, you will be able to find in the same page. So you can copy that token, security token, and then the consumer key and all of those things, which we have seen in our previous screens. And we are going to enter the same username, password, consumer key and secret key which we have generated from the app manager, and the security token where we have which we have shown just a few seconds before to reset that if we need any new one. So once we are done entering all these values in this page, we can click on the test connection to make sure the connection is working or not. So this is your very first stage where you can make sure you have make sure the connection is successful before we make any changes. So this is the one main step where we are doing the connection. So this is the very first stage. What we have to do when we are doing a Salesforce automation by using APIs. So here, once it has been successful, you will be able to see the connection is successful. So this is how we have created a connector between the Salesforce and the UiPath. So now we will see. So now what we have done is we have seen what are all the advantages, what is the Salesforce and all of those things. Now we have seen how we can connect UiPath with the Salesforce. And in this slide, I'm going to show you guys how are we going to do an actual automation. So for now, I have just explained only one activity, which will be a insert contract, but definitely in a very similar manner, you can just go ahead and explore all other activities which are available in the managed packages. So here, if you just look at this, we have the Salesforce application open. And in this Salesforce application, we have contract numbers. What we are going to do in this demo is we are going to create a new contract. So here, if you just look at this, there are 3 contracts under the coordinator name, Nigeria DXV bot Ops UAE. So in this, what we are just going to do is we are using this coordinator name to create the new contract. So how are we going to do that? By using the UiPath. I'm just going to explain you that. So once the bot has been run, complete the run, you will be able to see the one which has been created. So this is how the workflow which looks like to create any of the contract, where we have created this Salesforce application scope and we have configured this Salesforce application scope just the way we did it in our previous slides. And inside of that, we do have this composite request. Composite request is one of the activity. The way I was explaining, the composite request is going to take 25 accounts or 25 requests at a time. It is going to create a batch of 25 requests. And then it is going to pass those requests to the Salesforce. And inside of that composite request, you can just go ahead and call any of the activities like update, upsert, insert, and then delete. All of these activities, you can just go ahead and have it. And as an output of the composite request, you will be always having the database as an output, where as a data table as an output, where you will be able to see what are all the changes which we made. So here we have used this insert record activity. So here you can select the specific object in the Salesforce which you want to insert. It is not only in the insert, you will be able to find the Salesforce object in each and every set of activity packages which we do have. So you can just choose which object you want to do the modification. And when you click on that and when you're looking at the screen, there is already a sample values which maybe the similar kinds of sample value. If you want to go ahead and give, you can just provide them for the future references, and you can just go ahead and call these things. Like here we have just hard coded these values just for the demo purpose, and definitely when it comes to the actual, when we are doing the automation, when we have a lot of data to be inserted, all this data will be reading from one of the other database or from the Excel file, and then we will be calling this one inside of the for each, and then we will be passing all this as a variables. So we are passing this as a pick list of open, pick list of local. Why all this as a pick list is because of these values will be a drop down in the Salesforce application. So we have seen the data type as a pick list for these things. And the business line, under which specific business line we want to create this one, what is the contract type we want to create, and then what is the status, whether it is an open, whether it is a closed one, whether it is the status is still needs to be discussed. Of those kind of status, you can just go ahead and select whatever the values which are available from the Salesforce database. So how do we get to know like what are all the available options from the Salesforce? I'm just going to explain in our next slide. So you can choose based on those, out of those values, you can choose whatever the values you want. So here, once after done with the changes, as I said, the output of the scope will be a data table. And just for the reference purpose, we have just writing those data to the Excel file, and we can share that Excel file to the business for the cross verification for the first few runs. Once they have confirmed with first few runs are good, I think we can just eliminate this, writing that back to the Excel file, and those things can be eliminated. So here in the very beginning, we do have a couple of assigns where we are just trying to convert the normal string into the secured string, which are actually required to pass it as a secured string while we are doing the new connections. So we are just converting them into the secure string, the passwords and all of those things to pass it. So here we are just going to run the file, and you can just take a look. It has not even going to take like 30 to 40 seconds to complete the run. So the process is already completed. And then now if we just go back to the Salesforce application and reload the page, and it will take some time definitely to refresh the data and come into the UI. So once we are done with the reload, we will be able to see that the inserted record in the view, in the contracts view. So here, if you just look at this, there are four. Previously, there were only three, and we have created one more, and it has been inserted by using the UiPath bot. So this is how we can just quickly go ahead and have all this process to be done very easily and very quick. So here the main thing is we have to get the GUID here for the coordinators or any of the values which we are passing. Most of the time we have to pass them as a GUID, and we can just go ahead and how to get that GUIDs and all of those things. We will be able to, I'll be showing them how to pick them. But here it is, this is a very step. What we are showing now is the manual way of creating the contracts. When we are doing the UI automation, bot has to log in to this Salesforce application. It has to click onto the contracts, click onto new contract, and we have to enter all these values. And here if you just look at this, all these are the drop down values which were of the data type as a pick list in our activity list. And we have to choose all of these things one by one, and then we have to click on save all these actions. And when we are doing the UI automation, like passing each and every value for all of those fields, and then click on save, we have to make sure those elements has been loaded. We had that pick list of values has been available in that specific drop down and all of those things. Bot has to make sure everything has been loaded properly, and it has to navigate to each and every field one after the other, and then it has to enter the values. Definitely it is going to take at least 2 to 3 minutes when we do the UI automation. But here when we do this API integration or the activity package integration, it has not even took 30 seconds to go ahead and perform this action. So this is where the integration of the Salesforce activities is going to be much easier, much faster, low cost, and more reliable than the UI automation, right? So we have just explained like what is the difference between like how to do that manually, and also how fast we have done with respect to the UiPath here. So now, like here, we are passing a couple of the values over here. So how to take those values, how to generate those things is we have to just go ahead and search for the workbench Salesforce. Why we have to go for the workbench Salesforce? What is the workbench Salesforce? Is nothing but the Salesforce application, whatever we have seen in our previous screen, is just a visual representation. So in that visual representation, whatever we were seeing, like all the contract name, coordinator names, and then maybe like the business contacts list, all of them, it will be just represented as the names. But each and every instance of that will be having their own GUID. So definitely when we are dealing with respect to the database directly, and when we are doing the queries, we will not be going through the names, because there might be a chances where multiple businesses will have the same name. If not a business, definitely the customers will might have the same names. And we know as a best practices, when we are going to do any of the update or delete, it's always it should be must we are using the unique references, not based on any of the duplicacy that might occur. So that's where we have to go ahead and rely based on the workbench Salesforce, where we will be able to get all the GUIDs with respect to that specific name. So how can we go ahead and fetch those values is, I'm just going to explain you here. Here we have just searched for the workbench, developer or salesforce.com, and we have just logged into this workbench developer Salesforce. And here there are multiple instances that depends on like whatever the Salesforce application which our business has, that depends on them, like whether they do have the sandbox, whether they do have the dev, whether they do have the only the production and all of those things. Make sure if there is no sandbox version of the Salesforce, before you do any of the insert is still be fine, because we will be able to roll back, we will be able to delete them. So but before you go ahead and do any of the updates, please make sure you are going to track those transactions. And here we are just using the sandbox instance of our Salesforce application, because which is the very safest. Once we're good with all the applications with the sandbox, we will be able to just go ahead and push the same thing to the production. So here there are two ways. You can just always go ahead and you can click on login with the Salesforce and navigate to the SOQL queries. Or from this screen itself, you can just click on the queries and click on the SOQL queries, where you are just will be landing to the SOQL queries page, where it allows us to write our own queries. So this is our SOQL builder looks like, where we will be able to go ahead and choose whatever the views, whatever the options we do need, and all of those things can be taken care from here. So here what we do is like, here is a simple query where we will be able to enter our own query to execute, or we will be able to just have all of them from the drop down, and you just that query will be automatically generated here, and when you click on query we will be able to see those values. So here what we do is like, we will select the contracts. We need the contracts and the coordinator names basically. So what we are going to do is like, we are going to select all the coordinators under this contract, so that we will be getting this specific names. So here, if you just look at this, we are selecting the coordinators from the contract. And here, if you just look at this, when we clicked on to the query, we found the whole set of all the coordinators over here. And we have given just the coordinators. If we know exactly the column name where it is representing the name of this coordinator, we can just go ahead and click add that column name as well, where we will be able to find the grid along with the name of that coordinator. So with respect to whatever the name which we are looking for to insert the records, we can just go ahead, copy this grid and then paste it in your Excel sheet. Or what you can also just do is like, you can just directly, since we do have this access to this database, you can just always go ahead, query that, and you can just add a where condition and add your business names or the coordinator names. It will automatically pick this grid, and then you will be able to add that with the output of that query as an input to create any of the records. And how to see this? If you just look at this, there is an option in view Salesforce application. If you just click on this one, you will be able to see all the details with respect to this coordinator. So this is a very simple demo, like how to connect the Salesforce to the UiPath, and also how to do the modifications, or how to update or insert one record back to the Salesforce. We have seen both the way communication which has happened between the Salesforce and UiPath, and the UiPath to the Salesforce. So here I have given just the demo for the insert query, insert of the contract. You can just go ahead, try out for other options we do have with respect to all the Salesforce applications set of activities, and you can always reach us back with respect to any of the queries you do have. So this is all about how to integrate UiPath with respect to the Salesforce, how the two-way communication will happen, and how efficient this one over the UI-based automation. So if you guys have any questions, you can just go ahead, ask them out, and I'll be able to answer them. I'll try to answer them. If I'm not able to, definitely I'll come back with the answer for you guys for sure. You guys can put your questions if you have in the chat box, or you can always just reach out to us to our mailbox, or whenever if you feel connected with us for sure at any point of time. So I'll just consider that for no questions, but feel free to join us or come back to us if you have any more questions. And feel free to drop off if you really don't have any questions.